Hello, welcome one and all to episode 104 of A Stitch in Time. Today is Friday, June 21st, 2019. My name is Carol and you can find me over on Ravelry as Knitsnpurls. And if you're so inclined, you can stop by, check out the Ravelry group, which you can find by searching A Stitch in Time podcast under the groups tab. We are currently running a knit along, crochet along there called Shop the Stash Cal. By stash, I mean anything that you have acquired prior to 2019. Knit or crochet anything you like, chat about it in the chatter thread, and when you've completed your item, create a post in the finished projects thread and add objects or project photos to it as you complete subsequent items. I'll be drawing prizes out of both threads after the cal ends at the end of August. So come on by, check it out. Works in progress and UFOs are included since they're just stash until they're actually finished. So I hope you will join me there. I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today in my little corner of the world, which is the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada, about an hour and 15-minute drive from downtown Vancouver. A special hello to any new viewers. Thanks so much for stopping by and checking things out, and I hope you like what you see and that you'll be back. I am feeling rather rusty today. It's been a couple of weeks since I've podcasted. My husband Cameron and I were away last week on a little holiday, and it's already, it's after 2:30 in the afternoon. This day's just kind of gone by with not a lot getting done, and chances are, since it's this late, it probably won't see the light of day until sometime Saturday morning, but here we are. So forgive me, I am flying without show notes this week. I just didn't manage to get around to writing them, but here I am. Let's just go with the flow. I seem to be having a hard time getting things going today. So while I was on holidays, I did get some knitting done, but I actually was surprised that I didn't get as much done as I expected to. Having said that, I have worked on some things since I got home, cast on a few new things, so I'm excited to show those to you. And I even have a finished project, which you might notice wearing it around my neck. I'll stand up so you can see it a little bit more closely. This is the Crazy Magic Crescent shawl by Susan Ashcroft. There's the pattern. And actually it's not an accident, it's knit in this yarn. I specifically went looking for patterns that had been knit in this yarn, and as you can see from this photo here, this was actually even knit in the very same colorway. This shawl is a small crescent, although you can make it as large as you like because it's done sort of on a percentage system. So the base pattern is the YOLO shawl. No, not giving anything away. And then the designer has given a couple of alternate edgings for the shawl. The Crazy Magic ripple edging, and then this one called the Marian Tribute. So it is knit from Caterpillar Green yarn, which is now known as Gauge Dye Works, in the MCN fingering shawl striping, which is 70% superwash merino, 20% cashmere, and 10% nylon in the Peacock colorway. And this was a gift from Susan, who's a podcast viewer, and I actually got to meet her last year at Knit City in Vancouver. She very kindly gifted me several skeins of Gauge Dye Works yarn, and this is the second one that I have knit up. So I did take this project with me up to the cabin and worked on it there, and then I finished it once I got home. So it is very warm. I'm going to unwrap it so I can show it to you a little better, and then I'm going to leave it off. It's quite sunny out today. Not really a hot day, but just perfect temperature. But it is a little bit warm for a wool shawl. So look at that beauty. Isn't that gorgeous? As you can see, the yarn is a series of color blocks that go from this kind of mauvey purple all the way down to this royal blue. So the beginning is just stocking stitch, and then the border is this nice ripply chevron-y kind of pattern. So not a lot more to say about it, except it is a really nice small size, which I really like a small shawl to wear as a scarf. And yes, I deliberately wore this emerald green t-shirt because I thought it would go nicely with the shawl. Yeah, it's just a really nice size. So it's like a one skein project. There's actually only 370 meters or 405 yards in this skein. So that gives you an idea of what you can, how large you can get knitting a little shawl out of that. So thank you once again, Susan. I know I've thanked you in private, but I did want to say thank you one more time for such a beautiful, beautiful skein of yarn. I really look forward to wearing this shawl, and of course I will think of you when I do. So, you know, I fully expected to have my light ease done to show you. I took it up to the cabin with full intentions of working on the sleeves, and the truth is I have not touched it since I last podcasted. What I did take up is another Peacock themed yarn. This is my yarn from Stephen B's in Minneapolis. It is 3 Irish Girls Adorn Luxe in the Electric Peacock colorway, and this was an exclusive colorway for Stephen B's. And I worked on these. Actually, you can see how similar the colors are between them. Look at that. And I worked on these in the car on the way up. I got as far as where the heel needed to go in. And while I was up there, I put the short row heel in, and then I worked on the sock again on my way home. So you can see, I've got probably a couple more inches to do on the foot before it'll be time to do the toe. So I really like how this is knitting up. It's beautiful, bright, kind of neon colored. Well, I guess it's neon peacock. It should be neon, but I'm not sure the camera really picks up just how bright this yarn is. But it's so cheerful, and I just really enjoy working on it. It's kind of spiraling a little bit. I see it more in the camera than I do in real life, but it seems to have a slant to the striping. Anyway, very happy with those. Another project I took up to the cabin and did not work on are my monkey socks, but I did work on them before I went. So they are being knit from Sweet Georgia Yarns, Cashluck's Fine, in the Modern Mandarin colorway. Realize I actually have several projects that are being done from merino cashmere nylon yarn this week, and it really does have such a nice soft feel. So last week, I think when I showed these, or 2 weeks ago, I think I was about here. So I have since put in the heels in a complementary color, and I think it's Clementine. I will put a little note here if I am wrong, but I don't have the ball band handy. So I did just a yarn over short row heel there. So you can see I've just done it on that sock. And whoops, all tangled. Oh, I know, it's tangled. I'm thinking it's tangled on this one. It's actually was tangled on this sock blocker. Anyway, there's the other one you can see I have completed, I guess, looks like a couple of pattern repeats since I put the heel in. So that gives you a good idea of how they're going to look. So coming along nicely, but yeah, I got distracted. What can I say? So those are just sitting till I feel like working on them again. Something I cannot show you is I did get a chance to play while I was away with some design work, and I'm currently working on a sock, but I want to keep it secret till I'm closer to having the pattern ready for release, and so that's going to be a little secret for now. I'm going to catch my breath. My tea is probably cold by now. I've been attempting to get this podcast going and feel just so out of practice this week that I've re-recorded numerous things numerous times. It still has some warmth, but it's definitely not hot. When I got home, the next pattern, I guess it's the third pattern in the Handmade Sock Society 2, had been released. That is by Helen Stewart, Curious Handmade. And the pattern is the Cliff Walk socks. So as soon as I heard the name, it conjured up colors of blue of the sea or the lake or the river, brown of the earth, green of the trees. I just had those colors in mind, and I knew that I potentially had the perfect yarn in my stash depending on how it knit up. And that was a skein of Dream in Color Smooshy with Cashmere. And the colorway is Slippery Trail. Now you want to be careful on a slippery trail if you're doing a cliff walk. But to me it was just the perfect colorway. I believe that this was an exclusive to the Loopy U, and I think it was done for, I don't know what the, I can't remember what their summer kind of club is. It's like a little challenge over the summer where you knit, I think it's 3 projects, and I think if you finish them all using Loopy U yarn, you get a skein of yarn, something like that. I think they've been doing it for quite a long time. I've never participated, but I do remember being interested in some of these colors that had been dyed up. And I bought another skein too, I can't remember which colorway, but this one's been sitting in my stash for a long time. And I thought it would be perfect for these socks, and thankfully it did knit up just as nicely as I'd hoped. So I am just finished the heel flap and have picked up for the gusset. So as you can see, this pattern, it's a lace pattern. There's like a motif that runs twice on the across the front and twice across the back, and then there's a little bit of ribbing in here, varying amount of stitches depending on what size you're knitting. This is the 64 stitch sock, which is my typical fingering weight sock number for the most part, somewhere in that range. So not a lot to say beyond it's a nice, simple, predictable pattern. There's only 6 rows, and it's very predictable is not the word I'm looking for, intuitive. And so they're knitting up quite quickly. Love the feel of this yarn. It's soft, feels really nice, and yeah, I'm happy with that pattern yarn combination. So that's a win for sure. Okay. Well, before I show you my next work in progress, I'm going to talk about the next shawl in the Shawl Society 4, also by Helen Stewart. That came out yesterday, and it's called the Floating Shawl. Both her sock society and her shawl society have a theme of a seaside getaway. And so this is reminiscent of floating in the ocean. I think there's another picture I have here. Yeah. So this is a fingering weight shawl. You can see there's like a ton of garter stitch. It's a half pie shawl. So it's all garter stitch up until this lace edging. And to be honest, when I saw it, I was a little bit disappointed. Not because it's not a nice shawl. It's just I was really hoping for something with more than one color or more going on to keep my interest. And I don't know, I'm just not in the mood for a big half pie shawl that's almost all garter stitch. Not at the moment. I'm sure there will be a day that I would like to knit this, but today's not the day. It takes a bit of an odd amount of yarn. It is requires in all about 888 yards of fingering weight yarn. This was done in Sweet Fiber, Sweet Merino Light, which is similar to Tosh Merino Light, or what's another of the single ply yarns, Malabrigo Machita. I actually have 2 skeins of this yarn in my stash, but it's in a bright pink, and it just wasn't quite what I was going for. And unfortunately, because it uses a amount of in the high 800s, you need 2 skeins. So most 400 yardish skeins of sock weight or fingering weight yarn are not enough to complete it. So I don't have anything in my stash in fingering weight yarn that really makes me want to knit this. And I did go looking in my lace weight yarn, and I do have another skein of Saldana that I had bought quite a long time ago. This is in Topaz. This would be a really pretty color, but there's 1,200 yards here, so I would only need a little more, I guess, than 2/3 of it. So I'm a little bit hesitant to just knit it on to have that much left over. But I could make it larger if I wanted to. I also had I bought this yarn way back when I first sort of started shopping Etsy and such. I don't think the camera is really doing it justice, or the lighting. Maybe that's a better look at it. It's very pastel shades of kind of a corally pink, pale yellow, pale green, sky blue, and it is from stashupyarns.etsy.com, and it is a merino and silk lace weight yarn. There's 910 yards here, so there would be enough for the shawl. And it's called a flutter, which I thought floating, a flutter kind of goes, has the same sense of airiness to it. So I thought that might be suitable. Here's the tag. I have no idea if this person is still dyeing or not. This yarn is ages old. So when I do get around to this project, these are 2 possibilities. As I say though, it wasn't what I felt like knitting. What I really felt like knitting was like a 3-color shawl. And handily enough, Helen Stewart did come out with a 3-color shawl not that long ago for the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and in time for it, and it's called Edinburgh Lanes. It is 3-color asymmetrical shawl. And I was really taken with it when I first saw it. But at that time, I wasn't in a position or in the mood to get started on a big project like that. And this has a lot of striping and different stitch patterns and different rearrangements of the 3 colors. And so I decided that I was going to knit this instead. And there had a couple of possibilities in my stash, and I ended up pulling out these 3 colors of Madeline Tosh Euro sock that I had bought with a fade sweater in mind. And you may have seen them before because I did actually start a So Faded out of it and then changed my mind. So these are the 3 colors. You can see this red has quite a bit of variegation. This is a charcoaly gray with red and blue and other colors, green in there. And then this is just a tonal gray. So this is toner cartridge. This one is, okay, this one's AO or IO, AYO. This one is Brienne of Tarth Battles a Bear. And that apparently is a Game of Thrones reference. So I started this last night. I am definitely hooked. And so far I've just used the first 2 colors. And it is time to add in this toner cartridge, color C. And there are mostly the yarns are used, mostly these 2 yarns are used in conjunction with this one. But there is a point at the end of the shawl where these 2 are used together. And a little bit of me worried that they were too close, but I think you can see on the picture that that area is very subtly striped, and it's meant to be. And so I think it'll be fine. Even if it just looks red and gray from a distance, that's okay with me. See, that area here is where they're used in a striping sequence, and it's meant to be a subtle stripe. So I am really enjoying working on this. And yes, a lot of it's simple garter stitch, but there's striping to break it up, and there's some lace patterning too. Just the perfect blend of complex and simple that my brain requires right now. I just couldn't face the idea of knitting that much garter stitch in one sort of solid color, especially, or a tonal. Again, nothing wrong with the floating shawl, just not right for me right now. Yeah, so those are my projects since I spoke to you last. I still have not been buying yarn. I am very proud of that because I could have easily over the Victoria Day weekend or the Memorial Day weekend. There were lots of sales going on, and I totally resisted. I have a lot of yarn, and I'm really determined to knit from stash for a while. But what I did acquire are 3 stitch dictionaries, and I am having a ball going through them and looking at the various stitch patterns and imagining, mostly envisioning socks, because that is a sort of template I'm very familiar with. The construction of socks is very familiar to me, and I can easily picture a stitch pattern on a sock. Shawls, the construction, even though I've knit a lot of shawls, the overall construction is less familiar to me, and so I'm going to have to do a little bit of sort of what's the word, experimentation, and really looking at different shapes and how they're constructed before I can step to that, I think. But in the meantime, I'm enjoying going through the dictionary. So this is Up, Down, All Around by Wendy Bernard. All of the 3 books are by Wendy Bernard, and she has put together 3 wonderful stitch dictionaries. What's really great about this one is that she takes a stitch pattern, she gives you charts and written instructions, whether you knit it from the bottom up, the top down, and whether you knit it flat or in the round, and both of those. So some stitch patterns that are able to be reconstructed both top up and or top down and bottom up. Some of them just don't work both directions. When that's possible, sometimes there are up to 4 sets of instructions and charts for each stitch pattern. So it's wonderful because the other stitch dictionaries I have, for the most part, they're not necessarily charted, and if they are written out, which most of them are, they're written out flat, as though they were knit flat. And so you have a right side and a wrong side, and in order for me to envision the instructions, I have been taking graph paper and charting those stitch patterns onto graph paper so that I can see where the knit two togethers and SSKs and yarn overs and such go in order to form the pattern. So it's quite labor intensive, but necessary in order to really understand the construction. So it's nice to have someone do that for you. So there's Knits and Pearls, ribs, textured, slipped and fancy, yarn overs and eyelets, cables, lace, color work, and some hems and edgings. And then this book does have some projects in it too. So I'm going to just see if I can give you an idea without giving things away. Okay, here's a great example. So this is overlapping leaves. That's the name of that pattern. And if we flip the page, I think this is far enough away that I'm not giving anything away. There are instructions for bottom up flat and a chart, bottom up in the round and a chart, top down flat and a chart, top down in the round with a chart. So just with that one stitch pattern, you can knit it any way you like. As I mentioned, in some cases, some patterns just don't translate. You can't reconstruct them, say, from the bottom down or the top up, or they look very similar either way, so you can just knit it from the bottom up and it'll look more or less the same upside down. So depending on the case, she will or will not have given you instructions for those. So anyway, yeah, just tons and tons of swatches, good sized illustrations, so that you can get a really good sense of, a lot of them are this size, you can get a really good sense of what the stitch pattern looks like and kind of envision it in a project. So that's this one book. And then her second book, and I like that this is on a the ring binding because it lays nice and flat. I'm looking for a place to put this. I guess I'll put it back over here and hope it doesn't fall. Oh no, stick it on the floor. I'm running out of room. So then this one's the Knitting All Around Stitch Dictionary. And again, same idea, where she can, she's given you up to 4 different sets of instructions or charts. And it just carries on where the last book leaves off. It's just so fun just to flip through and imagine what you can do with some of these stitches. And then I think one of my favorite ones is this one, Japanese Stitches Unraveled. And what she explains is that a lot of Japanese stitch patterns sort of take stitches and do with them what North American designers just haven't even imagined. They just a lot of their designs are more intricate or just more imagined, and well, that's not a fair way to put it, but they have a uniqueness to them, I guess is the best way to put it. And I'm going to see if I can find a really good example of that. You just don't see the stitch patterns the same way. Here's one I just love. That I'd love to put in a sock one day. It's called Mini Cables and Tassels. Their charts, for the most part, are a lot longer. Like this chart is like 40 rows long. Another example. This is kind of a neat one here. Sails. So anyway, I've just really enjoyed going through these and getting tons and tons of ideas. And then while we were up at the cabin, we went into my mom's one night for dinner. I'll talk about that more later. She just lives about 10 miles or 17 kilometers from where the cabin is, for those of you who don't know that. So she was showing me this book that she had picked up secondhand on her recent trip, and has lent it to me for the time being. So again, tons and tons of just stitch patterns, instructions. But like I was saying, these are only written flat, back and forth, flat, no charts. And so any in here that sort of strike my fancy, I am going to have to chart. Isn't that pretty? Dutch lace. There are so many. Oh, I've just, you know how some people like to go through cookbooks? I am not one of them. This is like a cookbook in a way, and you can just imagine, use your imagination. So I've been having a lot of fun with that. I hope to have a design out for you soon. Takes a while. You gotta, figure it all out, knit up the samples, write out the instructions, and in this case I want to do 2 sizes, so I would like to have examples in both sizes, because I'm not quite sure how the larger size is going to work, so I'm going to have to actually knit it as opposed to just do it mathematically. So taking a while, but I'm enjoying it. When I'm not reading stitch dictionaries, I've been reading The Horse Whisperer by Nicholas Evans. Yeah, I have read this book a couple of times before. I am really enjoying revisiting it. For those, some of you may have seen the movie starring Robert Redford, and I can't remember the woman's name. Robert Redford, I don't care how old he is my #1 movie star crush. I just picture him in the way he looked in The Way We Were, and my heart melts. And he just does it for me. So I did see this movie, and I liked him in it. This is a story of a young teenager, and she and her horse were in a bad accident, and along with a friend who was riding her horse, and the friend and the other horse unfortunately were killed, and the girl and her horse are kind of healing together with the help of Robert Redford's character out in Montana. And yeah, and then there's a little relationship that's developing between the girl's mother and the Robert Redford character, Tom. So anyway, really enjoying this. I've been 3/4 of the way through, and go to bed at night and don't want to put the light off because I just want to keep reading. So that has been good. I'm going to put this on pause for a minute, go warm up my tea, and then chat a little bit about what I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. So I'll be right back. Well, you know it, my battery died. So since I recorded that last segment, I've had time to drink all my tea, write some show notes, and charge the battery a little bit. So I have it plugged into the wall now, and hopefully it has enough juice to get me through this so I can get going on the editing and processing and such. So yeah, it's been a couple weeks since I recorded. So I was trying to think what's been happening since then. The next day, Friday, my husband left for a golf weekend. So he was gone all day Friday, Saturday, and up till dinner time Sunday. And normally when he's away, I look at it like a weekend holiday for myself, and usually indulge in a lot of, you know, things I want to do, like knitting and reading and such. This one was a little bit different. Friday I had some errands to run and ended up going over to visit my daughter for a while. So my Stitch dictionaries had arrived that morning, and I couldn't wait to get back home and start going through them. So that's what I did Friday evening, is sat down with those and just got my first taste of all the different stitch patterns. On Saturday, one of my sisters and one of my brother-in-laws, not ones that are married to each other, we went to my aunt's place. There was a big family gathering to celebrate 2 of my aunt's birthdays. And so that's what we did Saturday. So I think it was like 8 or 8:30 by the time we got home that evening, which again, I spent doing a bit of knitting and just relaxing. And then Sunday, I did grocery shopping and packed laundry and packing because we were getting ready to go away for the week. So it wasn't quite as indulgent a weekend as I usually get to have, but that's okay. And so yeah, I packed tons of knitting for the weekend or for the week away, and all the Stitch dictionaries plus some other ones, and I was well armed. But as it was, we didn't have quite as much time as I thought. We got there, we left Monday, got there kind of mid to late afternoon, got settled in. So we had a nice relaxing Monday. We decided we weren't doing any work until the next day. So then next 2 mornings, Monday or Tuesday and Wednesday, we spent the full morning up till like 1 o'clock each day cutting grass. Now, our property is 40 acres in all, but it's not 40 acres of grass that needs cutting. There's still a sizable area, and nobody had cut it for several weeks because there weren't people up there. And in that time, the dandelions had bloomed and seeded. So when we got there, the whole place was covered in dandelions with their puffy seed heads. I never thought of it, but I was using my dandelion cup, and that was very fitting. So, you know, when I was a kid, they didn't really cut the grass that much, and it wasn't dandelions that grew. It was grasses, and they would go to seed in the summer. I can remember dry grass with the seed heads on it. We used to go among it and catch grasshoppers and things. And once my dad and his siblings retired, they started spending more time up there. And some would be there from basically May till September or October. And they started cutting the grass. And I don't know if it's climate change, which I do think part of it's climate change. It's certainly wetter than it used to be up there. And also I think maybe the dandelions have had a chance to kind of edge out the native species, but right now there's a whole big area that is really inundated with dandelions. It's just the way it is. So when you cut it, I swear they duck, and then you go over everything, and then these dandelions popped back up. So a lot of it, we were going over the same spot 2 or 3 times to try and get as much of the dandelion stems cut as we could. And still, after we were done, we still had these stems sticking up all over. It's just the way it is. It's not a lawn. It's not meant to be perfect. But it definitely was a huge improvement after we cut everything. It looked a lot better. And the lilacs, my uncle planted this row of lilacs, I would say in the last 10 or so years. I could be wrong about that, but they certainly haven't always been there. And they were in full bloom, just at their peak. They were beautiful, and there were butterflies all the time on them. Oh, they smelled amazing, and they just looked so beautiful. And then we had, all week, we had a deer that was hanging around, a doe, and I think we saw it the first evening up the road a little bit, nibbling on some bushes by the side of the road. And then we saw it every day thereafter. And the second day when we were cutting grass, it came right down to where we were both working. My husband was on the riding mower at that time, and I was on the push mower. And it was probably 50 to 100 feet away, just grazing on grass, not paying any attention to us. So it obviously felt very comfortable. And twice we saw it at the other end of the yard, just sitting, like laying down, sitting on these 2 knolls that are on either side of a gully that runs through our yard. And yeah, just sat there one time for like a half an hour. And it could see us because I went out on the porch of our cabin and zoomed in and got some pictures and video of it. It was looking right at me, but it wasn't alarmed. And Thursday night, we went into town to my mom's place to watch the, I was going to say the Grizzlies, but it was the Vancouver Grizzlies. It used to be our basketball team, but they are no longer. No, we went in to watch the Toronto Raptors win the NBA championship. So we had actually, the first night when we got there, we went into town to the pub in town and watched the game and had dinner. And so they just lost by 1 point. It was heartbreaking. So my mom had been away, and she came back Wednesday afternoon. So we went in Thursday evening, took dinner in with us, and watched it on her TV. And if you can believe it, the power went out with about 2 minutes to go in the game. And we're like, what? And there was like a thunder and lightning rainstorm, so I think it was probably had something to do with that. Fortunately, the power came back on about a minute or 2 later, and if you've ever watched a basketball game, you know the last few minutes of the game go pretty slowly, so we didn't really miss much, and we were able to see the final. So that was pretty exciting to have the first Canadian basketball team to win NBA championship. So that was quite exciting. And then, so when we came back out to the cabin after that, we drove in the yard and looked around, didn't see the deer, but pulled up in front of our cabin, and I got out and shut the door and went around to open the trunk, and it actually was in the yard, just had been out of sight, hidden by those lilac bushes at the time. And again, it wasn't very far away from us. It just looked at us and jumped the fence and continued to graze on the other side of the fence, and eventually, as it got darker, crossed the road and went up the mountain, disappeared out of sight. So it was really, really neat to see it. The first morning when I started cutting grass, right across from our cabin door, there's an area of long grass in among some wild rose bushes and such, and there was an indentation in it, as though a large animal had lain there. And we never actually saw the deer do that. I don't think it had revisited that spot, but that was our impression, was that a deer had lain in that spot enough to crush those grasses. So anyway, it was really, really neat to see them, or see it. And the next evening, Friday, we went into town, picked my mom up to bring her back out to the cabin for overnight. And then our daughter and her family arrived that evening, as did my niece and her family. And so we stayed until we had a wiener roast the Saturday, and then we left after lunch, took Mom back into town, and then carried on home. So Cameron wanted to be home Sunday before he had to go back to work on Monday, just to have time to kind of settle back in. So yeah, that's this week. That's all we've been doing, kind of settling back into real life, as I call it. He's actually going to work half the day tomorrow, and I am going to do some house cleaning that is badly needed. Dust bunnies and bathrooms need cleaning and all that. So that's my plan for Saturday. Woohoo! It was Father's Day in Canada and the US. I'm not sure if it's anywhere else in the world. Last Sunday. So we'd seen our daughter the day before. Our younger son was in Toronto. I picked him up from the airport yesterday morning. He came home yesterday. He was visiting a friend, but he also spent time with my sister and her husband the first night. He stayed at their place the first night. And then, so our oldest son and his girlfriend came over in the morning and had a visit with us before they headed off to her grandparents for lunch. So normally the boys bring pizza and beer and some guy movies on Father's Day at dinner time, and have pizza and beer and watch movies for Father's Day with their dad. So that's happening this Sunday instead, since they weren't able to all get together. So they're celebrating Father's Day a week later. Trying to think what else is of note, but I can't. Yeah, I'm not sure. It just, I did record an episode up at the cabin. I went in my grandma's old cabin, or what used to be my grandma's cabin is probably a better way of putting it. It's still usable. It's not like it's falling apart or anything. Anyway, I went in there. It was about an hour before we had to go pick up my mom. So my last hour of available time, I was able to do it. And when I got home, it was all blurry. And I'm not sure why, because I had started and stopped the camera before that, and that footage came out fine, clear as a bell. But for whatever reason, the whole episode was blurry, so I couldn't use it. So that's unfortunate. But what can you do? Yeah, I think that's it. I can't think of anything else. I didn't come up with something good for this week. I just not had it enough together to do that. So fill in the blank. What's something good for you this week? Tell me about it. I would love to hear from you. I've put all my contact info at the beginning of the each episode, but if you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a private message on Ravelry or leave a message in the Ravelry group, either under chatter, introduce yourself in the welcome thread, take part in the knit along. Love to hear from you. You can also leave a comment on YouTube if you like. And if you like the podcast and want to get notifications, by all means hit the subscribe button, and then you won't miss any episodes. So I think that's it. I am really happy to be back talking to you again. I can't wait to hear what all of you have been up to. Please share your projects. There is I think it's like, what are you making? Something like that, thread in the Ravelry group. And I keep forgetting to mention it, but I love, love, love seeing your projects. So by all means, pop in there and tell us what you're working on. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to get in touch, and don't hesitate to friend me on Ravelry if you like. I'll for sure friend you back. So on that note, have yourselves a wonderful week. We are going back up to the cabin next weekend. My sister from Toronto is coming out for the long weekend. It is our Canada Day weekend. Canada Day is not this coming Monday, but the following Monday, and so we are going up to the cabin with her for a few days because that's why she wanted to come out. So it'll be another week of kind of getting ready to go away. But I should be able to podcast probably next Thursday. So look for an episode then or Friday. So yeah, take care until then, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.